Hi everyone, I have Mike here. He's the fourth place winner at the Sorcery Social Club tournament or the Courtesan Cup. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, yeah, I'm doing good. So you piloted a Battlemage deck to a top four win. I consider that very impressive because my brother plays Battlemage and he's probably just not the best Battlemage player in the world. But it seems like you either win or you lose. It's kind of black and white with it, in my opinion. I don't know if that's how you feel about it, but it just seems like you either hit your stride, you do really well with like the fast pacedness of the deck, or you just don't get there and you don't get the tempo you need early on.
Definitely, I agree a lot with that assessment, but that's also kind of why I like it because of
Hmm.
it has this such an explosive potential that can be very overwhelming for people when it does work well. I mean, when it works well, it's one of the smoothest decks, just very aggressive. The variant that I ran was a bit more creature heavy. I actually didn't run a lot of the artifacts or the equipment that people will put on top of the battle mage. Um, the variant I ran had sandworms in it um, as well and pit vipers. So it played a bit more. I think because of that, it had a little more mid range potential, whereas a lot of battle mage decks get to 3 mana grapple shot into your face and then hopefully stick some powerful artifacts on top of themselves, and that can be good, but I also feel like that strategy can be really easily defeated if your opponent starts to just put chump blockers in front of you or um, has a dispel or a disenchant in hand, because suddenly all these things that you are putting on top of your battle mage are gone unless you have like a Cerberus and change, but that also dies to like a berry, which is an
Hmm.
extremely common removal spell right now.
Gotcha. Let's trip over the deck just so people can see it here. We got the Battle Mage, obviously. Uh, is this considered your favorite avatar?
So I was running the Avatar of Earth for a bit before this actually, and I think they have similar play styles. I actually like the Battle Mage a bit more. Um, I I think the thing that kind of deters me from the Avatar of Earth is it's very conditional and it doesn't have the card draw potential that the Battle Mage does. Where I was playing with Avatar of Earth, there'd be a number of games where I've death doored my opponent and I'm just kind of waiting to top deck something that may or may not
Hmm.
come before I myself end up losing the game. So I like the card draw potential with the Battle Mage, and I also, funny enough, opened a sorcery booster box, a beta, and got a foil Philosopher Stone and a foil Battle Mage in the same box. So I felt it
Nice.
was a sign.
Gotcha. Awesome. So, kind of going through the deck, you have three auras, five artifacts, 20 minions, 12 magic, and 20 sights. I I think you're right. Yeah, you're going a little bit more heavy with the minions than most people do with Battle Mage, and a little bit more light on the artifacts. But I'm interested in these thunderstorms here. You got three thunderstorms. I understand it's a good card, but I want to know from like a Battle Mage perspective, why add this with it being 4 mana?
Mm. Well, the big thing is with towers, you can largely get this off on turn three.
Mm-hmm.
What this does then is it's 9 damage in a single card, which is almost half your opponent's life total. So if you dump this on them, they need to start playing something to sponge up that damage. And ideally, while they're trying to sponge that up, you're continuing to develop and you're playing Atrocian Cavalry or Hippogriffs to other sites. So the increments of three that you're damaging frequently with this deck are pretty significant. And if you get a bat or a thunderstorm on top of them, um, if you manage to land some attacks as well in that same turn, then you're dealing. I say on average the deck's pretty good at dealing about 6 damage a turn,
Mm-hmm.
unless you have a slower start. But you really just want to race your opponent, and Thunderstorm is an effective card for that. It also, if you get it out early, it can help do an excellent job kind of controlling the battlefield as well. And so Thunderstorm combined with some of the deserts in the deck, it can kill unicorns because you're dealing that 1 damage, and you can manipulate the Thunderstorm as well at the end of the turn by moving it in some ways. So it really just it's a great control card, but it also, if your opponent has a slow deck that doesn't really do much until turn 4, turn 5, if you ramp this out on turn 3, you're likely able to deal at least 6 damage before they can put something down that would be absorbing those lightning strikes.
Gotcha. Going on to the artifacts here, you have the Amethyst Core, Philosopher's Stone, Ruby Core, one Tortimer Trinket, and one Rolling Boulder.
Mhm.
Kind of looking through this, did you ever think about adding Kythera Mechanism into the deck just to help with the Thunderstorm if you just wanted to specifically ping a card or ping the avatar of your opponent instead of leaving it up to potential chance?
I hadn't considered that, largely because I understand that you can fetch that with the Highland Princess,
Mm-hmm.
and that there will be ways to tutor for it. But I feel like it's such a build around card
Mm-hmm.
that um, the number of games that I would have maybe a Thunderstorm without the mechanism, and the Thunderstorm by itself would just be fine,
Mm-hmm.
mostly, or to have to draw the mechanism um, late game, it kind of feels bad because you need gas, you need a creature, and to kind of draw the mechanism uh, without Thunderstorm on the board, it just ends up actually slowing or interrupting kind of what the deck might want to do.
Gotcha. Okay. So the Amethyst Core, Philosopher's Stone, and Ruby Core, obviously for ramp, trying to get that cost
Mm,
reduction. Turn one, playing a site, getting an Amethyst Core, Ruby Core, or even Philosopher's Stone is really good
mm.
in your opening hand. The Torchmer Trinket and the Rolling Boulder, though, those are the two that they've piqued my interest. I wonder why the one include on Tortimer and then why the Boulder.
So the one include on Torsimer makes it an excellent search for Highland Princess. It also, tipping up the battle mage a little bit from 3 to 4 can be pretty significant. Also, with the vampires, taking them from 4 to 5, or
Mm-hmm.
sandworms from 4 to 5, making these things that are just slightly underpowered against maybe some earth minions to create equivalency is very powerful. Also, the deck often runs fine off of 4 sites. So when you get to 4, um, if you're not playing a charge minion, or something that costs that 4, you're usually casting something that costs 3. So you see the kobolds in there. You'll see like chain lightning cost 2, grapple shot costs 3. A lot of the blaze costs 3. So a lot of the time you'll have 1 mana left. And the Torsimer is a good way to get extra value. Um, Taking an opponent with a battle mage just attacking alone, going from a 7 turn clock to a 5 turn clock is significant. So um, just kind of reducing the amount of time that the opponent might be able to recover. The Torsimer is really, really good for that, as well as it combos extremely well with the Kobolds. So if you can put it on the Kobolds, get in for an attack, and then if you're fortunate enough where you're close enough to their avatar, you just end the turn and hit them for 3. So Kobolds with a trinket by itself can deal 6 damage potentially. So that's why largely I'd say the trinket's also great anti-dispel tech, because it always returns to your hand. So it's one of the few artifacts that isn't vulnerable to disruption from your opponent.
Okay.
And the
And the
boulder,
yeah, go ahead.
the boulder is it's a great potential finisher. It's also kind of a setup card as well. So if your opponent has a lot of chumpers, things that will just kind of stave off damage, being able to just finish with Boulder if they're at death's door, get them to death's door with Boulder, or because you have extra movement with hippogriffs and they're airborne, it allows you to also, if you ever need to, kind of utilize the Boulder as a nice way of positioning um, for a potential uh, multi card swing if you can 2-for-1 your opponent.
Gotcha. Okay. Going over to the minions real quick. You have three pit vipers, one Highland princess, three quarrelsome kobolds, three Gyre hippogriffs, four patrician cavalry, three sandworms, three dapper vampire. From kind of looking at this list for preparing for this video, it kind of looked like the game plan with your minions is the turn they come out, they can do something for the most part, or they at least present such a threat that your opponent has to change their game plan.
Exactly, and that's where because the deck runs towers, you can often get cavalry out on turn three, um, or hippogriffs out on turn three. The ramp combined with the amethyst core, for example. I mean, I've cast turn two thunderstorm
Mm-hmm.
with a turn one core into a tower, and that's extremely powerful. So if you can just kind of get that slight advantage where also with hippogriffs or cavalry being able to get that 3 damage and playing a spell and having immediate value is so important with this deck, but also being able to then position yourself now that you're in their territory. um, you have a little more flexibility with these minions, because rather than playing a minion not getting in, they can kind of play defensively and just respond with something right there to block. But if you can play and get in with that minion, then they're playing defense, but you're already on their side. Um, and so it gives you a lot of pressure in that way. And that's where the other spells, such as following up a hippogriffs or a cavalry with a blaze, to just kind of
Mm.
blaze through and get in for an attack, while also likely running through their avatar. um, you're now swinging for five, and so it's a solid kind of play to be able to just deal that 3 damage, and then the following turn deal five, and now your
Mm-hmm.
opponent's almost at half life already.
Gotcha. The pit vipers, are you typically burying these to have it as like kind of a trap site where it's like if you come on here and attack the site, then I'll jump up and attack you? Or is it kind of like what's the kind of the ideal strategy that you're trying to look for placement wise or movement wise with pit vipers? Like when are you playing them? When are you wanting to move them forward or do something with them?
So pit vipers are an interesting card because they're effectively a removal spell. You can move them up burrow. Typically, I will play them burrowed unless I need like an immediate value where they have a large minion that I can play pit vipers and then grapple shot over to, um, or have some sort of blaze movement. But the pit vipers are great in that they can kind of lock us, almost like a uh, root spider in some ways, but they also kill root spider. So they're
Mm-hmm.
great anti root spider tech. They also, again, they can kind of lock a site down where if I do manage to get my battle mage close to them or onto a site, if they try to play a big threat there, then the battle mage or the pit vipers can come up or protect the battle mage in some way as well. It's just a good way to make sure that you're not dead to root spiders, which can really create a huge problem for the deck.
Gotcha. And then Highland Princess being able to fetch one of your artifacts. Do you typically go for Philosopher's Stone or do you go for Trinket more often with Highland Princess?
It depends on where in the game I am. If I'm a bit later game and I only have a couple cards in hand, I usually won't go for the Philosopher's Stone. I might try to go to Trinket if I'm trying to close it out. Um, so it's very dependent on the stage
Mm-hmm.
of the game. If I'm fortunate enough where I have early ramp already, a core, or a stone, or a core, the ruby core, whichever core, um, and I draw Princess later, I will always go for Trinket. There's few times where I will actually try to get another ramp tool at that point, because once this deck hits 5 mana, uh, that's really all it needs. You could try to go to 6 if you're able to play multiple things in a turn, but usually just because of cost, a lot of things are 4 and 3 cost in the deck. So you
Did I lose you? Oh, the audio's out.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Sorry about that. It ended up making things when my headset died. Um,
it's all good.
Continue.
So we were talking about Highland Princess, just kind of when you play it, uh, what you would choose, kind of go from there.
Sure. The if it's early enough, and I don't have any kind of ramp, if I can play it on turn 2 or turn 3, I will likely go for some sort of core P-stone. If I get it later, though, and I've already kind of established more of a position, I'll go for the trinket just to add the pressure. In I since I already have the mana that I need, I don't need more mana at that point usually.
Gotcha. And then going to the Quarrelsome Kobolds, I've personally played with these guys a lot with me doing a lot of Earthfire Sorcerer uh, and having the Torchmark Trinket, getting to that 3 point to be able to, when you potentially go up against like an Autumn Unicorn, when it's their turn 3, you play your card and potentially have 4 mana or whatever, and be able to Quarrelsome Kobolds, Torchmark Trinket, play the desert to be able to ping them for 1, and then kobolds them when they come out is super nice. Is there any kind of plays that you typically go for with these guys that you're kind of like, I'll grapple shot then ping them, or anything like that that you're kind of using cards to combo with besides the trinket?
Sure. The As far as the kobolds go, really being able to uh, grapple, as you said, and get them up close. Um, Blaze. The thing is that the kobolds are usually a bit more tricky to play if you don't have something to just kind of deal that damage to at the end of turn. So
Mm-hmm.
it feels bad to just deal damage to your battle mage,
Mm-hmm.
because you can always take that too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have done that at times. It's often not great, but usually that's where the Petrosians, the Hippogriffs, those things that are just slightly bigger, you swing in with the Hippogriffs, ping the Hippogriffs at the end of the turn, and then next turn you can move in with the Kobolds, and the Hippogriffs can kind of pivot off. So those are, because you have these other minions that have that 3, or in the Sandworms or the Vampires, you're usually able to position it in such a way where you don't have to do anything immediately with the Kobolds, as long as you're just kind of setting it up. You're advancing with the Kobolds behind something that they are slightly smaller than.
Okay. And then we kind of already touched on Gyre Hippogriffs and Patrician Cavalry. They're a typical. I think they've become a mainstay in a lot of Battle Mage decks recently with the ability to charge in, do the 3 with a trinket. You could potentially, charge in for 4 and do a decent amount of damage. And since you are playing those towers, being able to bring them out a turn earlier and be able to hit your opponent so super early on for 3 is very nice. Going to Sandworm, I'm assuming this is a more of a response to Root Spider than anything else, or am I off?
No, I think that's fairly accurate. It's a combination of things, that it's an anti-root spider card, but also it's an anti-berry card. And berry, earthquake are probably the 2 of the most powerful removal spells in the game. So being able to, a lot of people will oftentimes keep in their opener a berry. So sure, they can bury your cavalry or your hippogriffs, but turn 4, your follow up, you play a sandworm. Well, now they have a bit of a harder time dealing with it. Additionally, because it can burrow and you can kind of move it underground, you have a little bit more influence over them, where they might not be able to kind of step off and start putting pressure on you, because they know the sandworm could come up on their side somewhere. So sandworm combined with blaze is very powerful for like a surprise. For if they play something to their front line, or if they start to advance, you can just come up in their back line, and now they have to deal with that somehow. So that's where I think Sandworm is really just a great card, given what a lot of the meta is. It's big enough where it survives kobolds, it survives Vioimps, it survives a lot of things because of that 4. So kind of the increments right now to the game of the 3, the 4, and the 5. The 5 usually being the heavier, beefier earth minions, the flanks, the pudge butchers. But the 4 being kind of the unicorn, you're able to, with the sandworm, have that increased flexibility to kind of, if they don't have a board presence established, you can just attack straightforward as a solid attacker, and they can't just bury it. Or really, they don't get a lot of value out of those berries. I played against Christian in one of the final rounds, and he essentially had to bury the sandworms because I was going to quickly death's door him had he not cast bury back to back, just to move them down. But it also doesn't feel good, because he's in a position where he's not getting a lot of full value out of it. He's just trying to stop me from advancing further. So that's where Sandworm is really powerful, in that it adds a solid amount of pressure. You can move in underneath their position if you want, a little more gradually, or it's just a solid beater that is a hard to deal with threat because of the burrowing.
Okay. So Dapple Vampires, them being a 5-drop for 4, but they have that really good healing ability, I don't understand the rulings too much on Dapple Vampire. I haven't played with her a ton myself. So if you're attacking a weaker minion, do you just take the power that they had and that's the healing, or is it always 4?
So that one myself, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't been in a situation. From what I understand, it is the strike. So the vampire itself deals that 4 damage.
Mm-hmm.
There was one instance where my opponent was at death's door. This wasn't in this tournament. It was just with some friends. But from what I understand, if an opponent's avatar is at death's door and you attack the avatar, they are no longer dealt damage. So in that instance, the vampire would actually not cause a life gain, but all minions deal their damage, their power and damage. So even if something was a 1 power thing, it would be dealt 4 damage. And so I would heal that 4.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes this card even better. So I might add it to some of my decks here. But it being a 5-drop, I kind of wanted to discuss the concept with you. Where are you, since you draw 3 sites, and them being potential towers or other things, where are you you drop the 3 sites, but then are you waiting for the cores to show up to get to that 4/5, or are you kind of waiting until you find a 4-drop or something else and then going to 4 to drop it? Kind of where is that line of, okay, I'm going to then draw my 4th site or get my core or wait until this or that happens? Kind of where is that stepping stone from the 3 you get to start with?
Sure. Usually, unless I need the vampire, I oftentimes won't keep them in my opener. Usually, they're typically better to draw into. As far as the lines you're talking about, though, as to when to play, usually what I'll do is if I have a tower, I will slow roll that tower, and I might draw an extra site to play before, because playing the vampire on turn 4 is pretty powerful. So I might dig a bit earlier just to kind of guarantee that turn 4 vampire, and then I don't really need to draw any more sites after that unless I was to get another vampire. So I usually the vampire line, if I do have one, it will be kind of holding on to one of those towers. Also, Imperial Road is another great card in this deck that allows you to kind of ramp out the vampire a little earlier, being able to play like turn 2 or turn 3, playing road into a tower will just get you there. Nice. So it's definitely something that usually can come out a little earlier.
Okay. The kind of going over to the magics now, we have 3 Chain Lightning, 3 Blaze, 3 Grapple Shot, 2 Infiltrate, and 1 Poison Nova. So kind of talking to you top 4 guys that I've interviewed already, I've heard mixed results on Infiltrate. It either did really well and helped out a lot, or it was, I saw so many root spiders or other things that just kind of wrote this off as just not a good card. Maybe I won't play with it in the future. Kind of, what was your feeling on Infiltrate as you played through the rounds?
Sure. So I truthfully, in the rounds that I played, I think there was only one game where Infiltrate was relevant. It's one of those cards that's kind of a 50-50, it seems right now. It can be very powerful. I think the deck list that I have has a lot of ways to deal with Root Spider. So it's something that I can definitely have answers to. I think if you Infiltrate, being aware that if they don't immediately Root Spider after that, that what I've done is I will actually try to walk their minion back to my site or put it onto one of mine. This way they can't just summon a Root Spider immediately underneath it. So kind of threatening that adjacent attack, but positioning in such a way that they can't just snag it back immediately. Sometimes, especially with Battlemage decks, if they do play a bigger minion, it's almost kind of like a fog for a turn where I can gain control of the 5 power thing, like a Pudge Butcher or something that they may have just played. And then that is enough of a tempo swing to allow me to attack for potentially 9 that turn, depending on how the board's developed. Which at that point, then usually there's so much pressure on them that if they don't play that Brute Spider that next turn to de-stealth and regain their minion. But then also that minion is simultaneously disabled that turn, right? That now they have their minion back, but now they've lost another turn trying to just stabilize. So that kind of pressure that Infiltrate can have has been great. But there's also, I've heard people complain about it being a bit underwhelming as well right now because of the meta. Something I've thought about and considered maybe even better for the Battlemage deck is Chaos Twister. It's similar cost. The double air, this variant of the deck does better with double air threshold. You see the Hippogriffs, the Princess, the Chain Lightnings. Double fire is a bit harder. So that's where you don't see Cerberus and Chains in this list because you're more likely aiming for double air rather than double fire in taking off a turn to try to draw into the threshold you need is brutal. So I think I've considered actually cutting this out for Chaos Twister just because it's a kill spell and it's potentially like if you can drop like a Pudge Butcher or a Flanks, whatever, or a Unicorn, some big minion, if you can manage to actually drop that on top of their avatar too, I mean, that's a massive swing because you're nullifying a threat, you're dealing damage to them, and you're swinging for 6 to 9 in a turn, which is a ton of damage. So that it is a card that I've debated swapping out after this tournament, actually.
Yeah, I've kind of, from what I've heard, is it's either like kind of what you were saying is like a lot of people say it's like it's just a pause for a turn or maybe 2 turns or whatever. Like the longer you can make that pause happen, the more Infiltrate's good. And the other way is, okay, I can infiltrate this thing, swing at this thing, and now I've gotten rid of 2 threats because they're both 5 power or whatever. And that's kind of the situations I've heard about and just kind of seeing people kind of talk about. I think that's kind of where I think Infiltrate's good. I don't think Infiltrate is necessarily, I'm going to steal this dude and then immediately use him to attack, because then it kind of wastes the opportunity for them not to be able to use that card that they just spent potentially a ton of mana on and it kind of feels bad for them to bury their own dude. So
yeah. Well, they can't even target it if it's infiltrated. So
gotcha. Or I guess it would have to be like an earthquake, something that just targets the site.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I think it might have maybe it will stay. In my opinion, I think it might be good enough to stay around. I think definitely as things change and this game is always like after the tournament everyone's like, oh, I gotta figure out how to get rid of like deal with this deck now, and the whole meta changes and then it changes the next time there's a big tournament. It just seems like every time we have a tournament recently it's been a different deck. It hasn't just been this is the deck and you can't beat this deck, it's just this deck and you just have to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think that's probably why Sorcery is such a great game right now. Is the meta, despite the game being out almost a year, well, not quite, but 6 months, it's not solved. That there's so much variance that there's always a new threat. There's always something new. It feels so. Even though there's a set card pool, exactly to what you said, trying to figure out what could be next, people trying to play around things, and Infiltrate's a great card to respond to whatever kind of surprise thing usually your opponent might play.
Gotcha. So I see that the Chain Lightnings are something I don't usually see in Battlemage, at least that I've seen. It's kind of walk us through why Chain Lightning. I know maybe why, and if you don't mind me taking a guess, it's one of those I can target you, and then since I can't like you, because fire bolts and other things, it's kind of one of those things where it's like I have to get through you to get to the thing I really want, especially if your opponent's at Death's Door and you need to do that final blow. Or chain lightning is I target you, then I target you, and then that takes them out. And I think that might be why you have it in the deck, but I don't know. Maybe you have some secret ideas here.
No, no, that's I mean that's a large part of it. I think with let's say a game does become a bit longer and grindier, and there have been a couple that I've played where you get to 6 mana. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm Battle Mage and I'm on your site and I attack, you can always kind of deal with a 4 power threat and deal with them, kind of ping the threat, hit them for 2, ping the threat again, and then just swing. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
5 point swing, or kill a couple little chump blockers that might be preventing some of your other minions. It's a great closer. It's such a versatile card. It can really just follow to get to an opponent and get them to death's door. And it's just a good way to kind of clear out a clogged board. Or, as I said, just deal like a potential 7 point swing with a bit more mana. So that's
Okay.
where I think the chain lightning is a great kind of finisher. It's also really nice combined with deserts. So you can
Mm-hmm.
play a desert, chain a couple things, maybe deal them 2 and kill like a boss troll or something, and get in there with like a hippogriff, or a cavalry that would have been a good trade in their favor.
Gotcha. Okay. The I see that you're running the three blazes, which I think blaze is a really good card, even outside of Battle Mage, just being able to not be intercepted as well as just being able to do that trail of 2 2 2, especially if you ping the desert, use the desert
Mhm.
to ping for one, and then be able to run through and potentially hit everything that was on that site that you pinged for one. That thought was safe, right? Because with desert, and then he has this thing. Well, then we could trade one thing, but then you blaze through, hit the avatar through the blaze, but then burn everything else on the path. It's pretty good. Uh, is there anything else you kind of that you're thinking about that I did not answer in that, or?
I think really Blaze also combined with Airborne with the Hippogriffs has
Mm-hmm.
been one of the most powerful.
Okay. Yeah.
Being able to
Yeah.
just kind of draw a little triangle, burn
Mm-hmm.
something, and strike, deal 2 to their avatar, maybe kill a minion, and then hit them for 3 is extremely powerful. So the Blaze combined with Airborne is a really a great combination. Really just kind of it essentially allows like any of those 3 power minions to get in there and deal that 5. It's a good surprise on kobolds. So like your opponent might play a bit
Mm-hmm.
more forward, but if you can kind of run behind and attack in a corner that isn't defended, then you just deal 4 and then end the turn and deal another 2 to them, and that's 6 right there. So thinking about the incremental damage, that Blaze is a great way in doing that. Um,
Okay.
and it also helps other minions that you might have, like the kobolds. So if you blaze through with hippogriffs, get them for 2 through their avatar, and then striking somewhere and dealing 2 to like a unicorn, and then just ending the turn with kobolds, and it kills the unicorn. So those
Nice.
kinds of plays are very powerful and swingy in this game.
Very cool. The Poison Nova. I've seen a lot of this in the top four decks I've been playing. I don't think I've not playing, but I've been talking with all these guys about the. I think all of them have a Poison Nova in their deck so far that have played the Air Fire. It seems like when they were discussing it was this is my get out of jail free card. If I get overwhelmed, I can pop this on my, on my avatar, get rid of everything around me, and then be able to kind of reset and move forward from there. Is that kind of how you feel about the card as well, or is there something else there?
Certainly, it's one of the cards that I've actually debated after this event. I think because of the way this battle mage is, it's a tricky one where I want to be in their face on their
Mm-hmm.
side. If I can grapple shot onto their side, they start to develop again, thinking that they're going to block some of my minions. Ideally, I have board position and I'm kind of getting ready to set up. They think they're going to have all these favorable trades, or they're going to just start blocking my battle mage's attacks. If I can just pop, it becomes a one-sided board wipe. And that's where Poison Nova can be very good. I actually thought about increasing, cutting a vampire and increasing a Poison Nova
Okay.
with this list, just because there were a number of situations where I feel like Poison Nova would have actually helped me a bit more. And so having that single copy, I felt a bit underwhelmed, but only because I wasn't drawing it, actually. I don't think I drew it during the entire tournament.
Wow.
Um, so it's something that having that one extra, I think, would have been relevant at times to see it.
Okay. And then like we kind of jumped over it, but grapple shot, being able to kind of slingshot yourself over to the other side, be able to attack your opponent. On top of that, doing six, like you said, is kind of what your benchmark is trying to do six a turn, which is a really good rate.
Mm.
It means, right, you only have like five. It's like, okay, you have 5 turns. Let's see what you can do in those 5 turns. And I don't think there's a lot of avatars that can go as fast as a battle mage to that 5 turns. Like a lot of people, their fifth turn is kind of where I think that a lot of those mid range decks are like, okay, and now I'm hitting my stride. Or battle
Hmm.
mages now, I've been on my stride, I'm doing the damage, you're almost gone.
Hmm.
So I think grapple shots just kind of adds to that game plan in a big way.
Yeah, yeah, and you look at Blaze and Grapple Shot are similar in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. Just having that surprise movement, having that explosive movement. The Grapple Shot really combines well with the vampires. Having the
Okay.
vampires able to just kind of zoom up. If you were taking some hits because you're attacking their sites with your battle mage, and they might have some defenders, being able to just kind of recover
Mm-hmm.
that life. Um, it works well with kobolds also, and I've had to use it at times with pit vipers where they play like a big threat, and I can't deal with that. So being able to just grapple the pit viper up. And what's nice is if the board's developed enough, they can't just get rid of the pit viper with a desert, because
Mm-hmm.
things are developed a little more. So any other kind of threat that they're going to be putting down, that's a significant, they actually have to start to try to trade down and maybe play like a violent or their own kobolds or something like that because they don't want to play another large minion with a snake on their side.
Okay. Before we move over to the sites, I wanted to ask, there is, besides, the normal tap play draw a site, you do have that ability to, when you've attacked and killed something, you get to draw a card. How relevant did that ability feel in the tournament? Did you see yourself getting those extra cards often, or was it kind of, I'm gonna win when it comes to a good trade, I will do it so then I can get that card, but it's more about the trade than it is the card.
I often have found that's probably the biggest attraction to Battle Mage from Avatar of Earth for me,
Mm-hmm.
is because that potential to draw that card. I think it's very powerful if they have, like, if you're playing against Death Speaker and they're playing Apprentice Wizards, and I'll trade one life for a card all day long. Some of those smaller minions that, especially decks that play villages, being able to, like we talked about, I'll grapple shot turn two potentially, or turn three, um, strike their avatar, and then I'll just attack the foot soldier to get back that card.
Okay.
Those kinds of things they're there. They're not always relevant. You don't get. It's not like you're not getting a ton of cards depending on the opponent, but if they do have a lot of smaller chump blockers, or just smaller cards like the two power minions, that's where I think Battle Mage can really, it gets that value back for sure.
Gotcha. Okay. Uh, Going into your sites, you have 2 copies of each of the towers. You have max copies of Imperial Road. you have 3 remote desert, one arid desert, 3 ruins, 2 sinkhole, 1 color out of space, 2 watchtower. So kind of running through this, the one that intrigued me the most was that sinkhole.
Mm.
Kind of, is it just to I can work with 3 if I really need to potentially make it so you are 1 turn behind what you really need to do. Is that kind of the play there?
Exactly. I mean, it's tempo.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the battle mage plays. It's one of the most powerful things I've been able to do is uh, playing Imperial Road and then playing a sinkhole next to it, blowing up one of their sites. I get that extra
Mm,
mana, or even kind of having a board presence and then or having some positioning, sinkholing their thing and then just playing a tower to get a little more like you. It's a great way to keep them behind, and that's
gotcha.
where sinkhole is such a powerful card in Battle Mage to help keep them off because you have the towers to give yourself a little more ramp. You have the Imperial Roads. If you're able to keep them a little behind, it's pretty huge.
Very cool. And then the 2 watchtowers, I'm assuming, are just kind of anti-infiltrate tech, just to make sure, hey, I get to play with these, but you don't get to play with these, kind of thing.
Exactly. I mean, one of the worst things that could happen to this deck is having a sandworm or having a vampire get taken over by an infiltrate,
Mm-hmm.
because that's brutal. And then having my opponent attack me for 4 and then gain 4. I mean, that's a 8-point life swing there, with a single card essentially. So the watchtowers are just a little bit of extra precaution to make sure that um, I'm not going to get blown out by an infiltrate every time.
Gotcha. The kind of is there anything else you would like to say about the sites before we kind of move to the sideboard here?
It's
Okay.
pretty straightforward.
Yeah. The sideboard here, the Pillar of Zeros, I'm assuming is more if you think that you need more healing and potentially being able to roll into this to get rid of that, as well as, if you're going against Death Speaker, being able to reset their graveyard so they can't potentially use like six violence on you on a turn in the game. The 4 disenchant. That's why so many disenchant. Just because you need to potentially find one, so you make the max.
So that this, I'd say this is largely because I don't know how many Enchantress I might be going against, which can be the deck usually is favorable against, but disenchant. Also, I'd say is because there's been a lot of life gain. There's a lot of Angel's eggs
Mm-hmm.
kind of creeping around, that I've seen at least within my local community. Disenchant is so powerful because that's actually how I ended up placing 4th instead of 3rd against Mike, the other Mike who I play with.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up beating me. The first game I ended up winning. The next 2 games he quickly played Angel's Eggs, 2 Angel's Eggs back to back, and the Battle Mage has a real hard time coming back. One Angel's Egg is manageable with
Yeah.
some draws, but 2 Angel's Eggs, it's just so much. It's also great against other Battle Mages. So in the Battle
Mm-hmm.
Mage mirror, um, because I'm not running a lot of like Crown of the Victor or any of
Mm-hmm.
those things, I can disenchant their things. Also, Crusade, Jihad are kind of tough cards. If they
Mm-hmm.
can start, if they can put a Crusade or a Jihad down and start making their kind of semi-larger minions already larger, that can be
Mm-hmm.
really problematic for Battle Mage to have to try to punch back. The deck itself also, uh, an Atlantean Fate will just crush the deck. So
Yeah.
because I run such a small on so few mana, if they manage to get an Atlantean Fate down turn 4, turn 5, that's where the deck also struggled against Roots of Yggdrasil. Um, because those, if I can get reset and my opponent can stabilize in some way,
Mm-hmm.
um, you have to have something to get rid of that enchantment or something that might be locking down uh, my sights, or a bigger, like a flaming sword battle mage would be
Right.
kind of
Uh,
a scary thing for this deck to fight
mhm.
against.
Okay. Going through the rest of this, you have the Grim Reaper, Jihad, and 3 Violent. Is this kind of to be the more aggressive package if you just need to end the game quicker than you already would? Or what's kind of the play here? Because I see the Jihad, working well with Violent, being able to play that down late game when they're already on Death's Door, just be like, Violent, good game kind of thing.
Yeah, the Jihad is great for that with kobolds and bioimps, being able to just kind of drop those things there. It's also great with sandworm,
Mm,
the cavalry, like just
yep.
making these things that are slightly. I mean, pit vipers as well. If you can, making them 2 power instead of 1 lets them resist deserts. Um, so the Jihad is just great for that. And the Grim Reaper is really, it's a solid card, because if you can get to 5 mana and then Grim Reaper grapple shot into like a boss troll or a unicorn or
Yeah.
Hodge Butcher, just being able
There we
to,
go.
it's a card that I never play on 2. I would
Hmm.
always, unless my follow up is a surprise blaze. But being able to, I usually would hold a grapple shot in Grim Reaper, and that's where you just get that stripping them of bulky minions that will
Hmm.
make it harder for me, can just be so valuable for this deck.
Nice. Uh, kind of, we're kind of short on time here, so I just kind of wanted to quickly touch on your. So, from what I've heard, is you had to win all 3 of your games to get into the top 4 for draft. So, clearly, this deck did well for you to have that record. But kind of walk us through some of the decisions here, and something that I'm always interested in for someone that tops major events that are sealed or draft is kind of what's your strategy for pack 1, what's your strategy for pack 2, what's your strategy for pack 3?
So really, the strategy I have is just to make sure I have enough minions. My first pick, pack 1, was Thunderstorm.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as I talked about before, just an exceptionally powerful card. Um, I actually did not get a lot of great cards in the pack 1. I ended up taking Swan Maidens,
Mm-hmm.
just because there are minions are so important in this game. Focusing on curve is also so important. So being able to play 2 cost things on turn 2, or two
Mm-hmm.
cost things on turn 4. My curve was exceptionally low. I had a good amount of minions, um, and so I had so much blue the first pack, and a little bit of air.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I ended up getting several Vile Imps in pack 2. Flaming Sword came my way. Flaming Sword's a great finisher. It's such a powerful card. In my pack 3, I opened and got extremely lucky, and had Nimbus Gin, and was
Nice.
already like heavy into air. So at that point, I actually also got Pack the Zephyrin Airship in pack 1. I think it was
Okay.
pick 3 or 4. And so that was a sign to me that air was open. That card
Mm-hmm.
is extremely powerful, being able to have surprise explosive movement, as
Mm-hmm.
well as what's great is when you play it, if you have it carry a minion, that minion can briefly move as though it had airborne almost, by moving that diagonal direction, even if that's the first turn that the airship was played, because now the airship has picked it up, so to speak.
Gotcha.
So getting that surprise movement is very valuable.
Nice. The thing that I was the most interested in is that yeah, you are really heavy in minions, which is a fantastic thing to be in draft specifically. And with magic, kind of walk us through your magic selection. Was there more that we obviously don't see in this list because they didn't make the cut? But why so little on magic and maybe go above that 24, 25, you know?
So we were told that we were capped at 25. That was the
Oh, okay.
max. So we could not include more,
Okay.
which makes sense for this tournament setting.
Mm-hmm.
As far as magics go, you see the Riptide and the Mad Dash. Those are kind of
Mm-hmm.
cantrips. Surprise movement is always good. The teleport, especially being surprise movement, it's also a great finisher to
Mm-hmm.
just my opponent thinks they're crouched in a corner safely. I just teleport something, and you see that in the draft game that I played. My game was recorded against Pete in the
Okay.
Courtesan Cup, so you'll see the final game that I played where I essentially
Didn't you play like two Swan Maidens like like right back to back? I think I watched it and I was like, dang, this guy's just dropping all these small minions really quickly to just do a lot of damage.
yeah, and that's where I passed two copies of Amazon Warriors, and I considered there were a couple slumbering giantess that I took or that I could have taken earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but it was my pack one, and I literally saw almost no good red cards, so I was
Dang.
hesitant to try to take one of those and then just have a couple giantess that will never get woken up,
Right.
or it'll have to cause me to slow roll deserts and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, which would feel awkward. So I ended up, interestingly enough, getting the three bioimps, getting the heat ray,
Right.
the two heat rays, and then also the Jin in the final pack, which would have been an easy discard, wake up a giant uh,
Right.
play, but it ended up working out. But what I also thought was a fun interaction, and I learned was the bullfrog being able to eat one of their minions temporarily. If I attack the site that has the flaming sword, or with a minion that has flaming sword, it will kill what's in the bullfrog's stomach if it's with the splash damage.
Mm.
So this is a card that typically I don't like blue because it's more defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but being able to potentially just eat something big if they step in and then continue to be aggressive with my smaller minions is why I think this card kind of it worked out in that way.
Gotcha. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the draft deck and just kind of talk about draft, or is
I love draft. Draft is one of my favorite things. I have a background playing Magic the Gathering
right?
when Friday Night Magic wasn't Commander and it was just drafting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really where you kind of learn to different, like it's a whole level of skill. And I think that's where
Mm-hmm.
differentiation of like somebody who net decks something and you know, can play with those cards, but being able to pick cards on the fly, read signals, develop a strategy,
Mm-hmm.
that's really so much. There's a higher skill cap in drafting, and like I said, I got lucky with the Nimbus Gin in Pack 3.
Mm-hmm.
It was a major threat every time I
Right.
played it. But you saw my opponent in my final round. He was still able to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not an impossible card to beat, but uh, it's certainly a powerful one. I also one of the things I thought was fun. I never did it, but the um, Mega Amoeba combined with Mad Dash or Riptide, those kinds of surprise movements actually help Mega Amoeba get bigger
Mm-hmm.
faster. So I thought that was just kind of a cheeky little combination of things.
Gotcha. Nice. Going into our last section of the video here, let me pull up these questions. These are typical questions that I ask at the end of the interview just to kind of uh, let the audience kind of get to know you a little bit more and just more about your preferences of sorcery and other things like that, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Awesome. So we kind of already discussed the how did you learn about sorcery, but kind of with the whole, learning about sorcery, how this game works with only a set a year, you have to be, I think you have to be more interested in the mechanics of the game than just like, oh, well, this is just kind of rinse and repeat and we'll get new mechanics every 3 or 4 months and we'll just have fun with that. So kind of what are the mechanics that make you stay invested in the game the way
Mm.
you are?
The grid system. so much like chess, and it's such a cool feature. It adds an amazing level of depth and complexity, as well as the Atlas system. Having two separate decks, a spellbook and an Atlas, is so refreshing as a former Magic the Gathering player who sometimes you just lost games because you never drew a site or a land, and that always felt bad because it some of those games were never even games when that happened. Whereas with sorcery, and mulliganing is such a huge part of a strategy as well, especially within
Right.
draft. You see, I'm running 3 colors in my draft deck. Um,
Right.
when you're running only 12 sites in a draft tournament, it's easier to play 3 colors. It gives you more diversity of the tools that you can use, and I think that's where a sorcery feels like it wants you to play with the cards.
Hmm.
So the grid system, the Atlas kind of style to the decks, as well as just the subsurface, the atop the sites. I mean, it's like 4D chess.
Hmm.
Is what it feels like sometimes. Um, so yeah, there's just a lot of depth and complexity to it that really feels rewarding.
Right. I think so. Something that's interesting. I thought like when I don't know how much you know about Flesh and Blood, but it's kind of just like a very like math game. Like you
Mm,
do the right math and you'll probably win the game.
mm,
And when I got into the game, I had played a little bit of Magic. I'd played Pokemon when I was younger, but this
mm.
was like kind of the first game I committed as an adult to playing. So, I have a little bit more of a cash flow than I did when I was in high school and things like
Yeah.
that. So then it makes it so you can kind of truly invest in a game and learn the intricacies of it. And it was really interesting because it had been the most complex game I'd ever played when it came to just having to math it out and figure all this stuff out. And then uh, my wife, who plays sorcery and what was one of the reasons I got into sorcery as well, is we could play it together, and she refused to play Flesh and Blood. She was like, "No, I don't like that game. I don't want to play that game." And so I was like, "Okay, well, there's this new game that I'm potentially going to play." And she was full of. She watched a bunch of YouTube videos learning how to play a game. She's like, "Yes, I want to play this game. It looks like fun." I was like, "Okay, cool." But to kind of go back to, I think this game is way more complex than I think people initially think it is. And the more and more you play it, I don't think it becomes more simple. It becomes more complicated. Where it's like, okay, is this the turn I'm supposed to draw a site? Is this the turn I draw a spell? Like there, all these kind of. I think being able, because of the separation of the two decks, it then becomes more of a, like you were saying with Magic. It's like, well, I'm just gonna draw this card, and maybe I'll get a land, and maybe I'll be able to play something this game. Or instead, it's now, okay, it is actually a detriment to the game plan to draw a site, right? Like
Mhm.
you would rather have a land surveyor, right, to give you that site or find another way
Mhm.
to get that site versus using your draw for the turn to
Mhm.
get a site, because then it's like, well, I don't really. I'd rather draw a spell because then that furthers my game plan. Where drawing a site does further my game plan, but is not as much as a spell on average usually does, right? So it becomes one of those games of, okay, when do I draw my sites? When do I play those sites? And the interactions between your opponent's sites and your sites. So I think that becomes makes the game a lot more complicated. And hopefully as the game progresses, that now you're going into that 4D chess thing. It's like, okay, we're going to introduce a lot of void cards. So now you have the void as a problem, as well as the below areas of submerge and burrow and the
Mhm.
airborne regions. And it's like it could become a lot more complicated, which I think will be interesting. Moving on to this question is kind of one of those where a lot of people say, okay, I really can't answer it because I just have so many. So if you need to, you can go to three. If not, and you do actually have a favorite, we can go with one. What is your favorite artist in sorcery currently, if you can, or we can go to that three.
That's a tough one. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, that is a really hard one. I, but I'd say personally, my top favorite is Ian Miller,
Okay.
just
Right.
because of his artistic style and the
Hmm.
sharp penmanship. I think Jeff Menges is a definite close second. Just like his aesthetic and kind of the impressionism and like the
Hmm.
feel that he does so well. Like you can really feel that fantasy vibe. Um, I think though, yeah, Ian Miller, that it's just so sharp and there's so much going on in all of his cards, and it's actually one of my goals is to get a play set of all of his cards in foil.
Oh
I've
wow.
been
Yeah.
I've been fortunate enough to open up two foil Geistwoods in the course of my time playing sorcery. My buddy Mike, who was in the tournament and ended up tearing up the Eric's Curiosa, ended up being given the Relentless Crowd promo,
Hmm.
which I was a little green with envy about, given that it's also Ian Miller. So
Right.
uh, yeah, his there's just the way he does the characters and his
Hmm.
anatomy, and it's almost like body horror. Um,
Right.
the way he does them, it's so impressive and amazing.
Do you have the Geistwood playmat?
I don't. That's actually one of the playmats that I want to get. It's one of the only ones besides the Mirror Realm that I want to get. What about yourself? Did you get in?
So I do like the playmat, but I am willing, if you want to talk about this off camera, I do have one, and I would be more than willing to give it to an Ian Miller fan if you want to talk about discuss something over trade or whatever.
Sure, I'd
Um,
love to.
yeah, it's a very nice mat, and you just get to see the true amount of detail that is in this card. Like
Mhm.
I like seeing it on a card. Really, you're like, wow, there's a lot of detail, but being able to see it at that bigger format is a treat to behold for sure.
It's
But if you,
amazing.
I still have it in the bag, so if you wanna talk about it, we can.
We can work something out.
Okay. And then it was Jeff Menges, right? It was the other one that you were saying was a really close second. I'm also a huge fan of Jeff Menges. Did you get any of his cards signed? He was there.
So I actually bought one of his artist proofs a
Oh,
bit
very
ago.
cool.
I bought a Pact with the Devil artist proof from him, and I actually just commissioned him to do a picture on the back of the card. Asked him to do the devil emerging from the ground from the sorcerer's perspective. So, kind of
Very cool.
see the earth opening up, seeing kind of what would be through the eyes of the person, kind of, or the spellcaster summoning the devil.
Nice. Yeah, you'll have to send me a picture when you get that, and he has it all done for you. I would love to see that. That seems very cool. Yeah, one of my favorite cards he's made is the Watchtower. It's
Mm-hmm.
so I grew up in Oregon, and there was a camping trip that a bunch of my buddies did a lot when we were in high school, which was to go up to this old fire lookout, and it
Mm-hmm.
just reminds me of that with the Watchtower. It's just like this where you can see 360 degree view from this watchtower and be able to just see the mountain ranges and stuff. It kind of reminds me of that. But yeah, Pact with the Devil is such a cool card. The concept of it, especially in a Death Speaker deck, is just absurdly broken with Grandmaster Wizard.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, they're very good picks in my opinion. And yeah, Ian Miller, I'm hoping to see a lot more of his work in Arthurian Legends moving forward as well. The if you I guess we kind of touched on this, but I guess if we want to, what are the top three cards art wise? It doesn't have to be specific to Jeff Menges or Ian Miller at this point, but just kind of cards that you're like, wow, this art is amazing. It doesn't mean that they're my favorite artist, but this card really spoke to me.
I think it will be. I mean, Severin. Pino, I think is how
Mm-hmm.
to pronounce their name. I think their original avatars. I got fortunate enough where I bought an aftermarket after Kickstarter case of Alpha,
Nice.
um, and I ended up getting a foil avatar of Earth, um,
Wow.
which is a pretty amazing. I mean, like the original four avatars, like the detail, the vibrancy, like there's a whole vibe, as the kids say, to them. So I definitely they're probably some of the most they already feel like iconic within the game.
Hmm.
And there's Avatar of Air decks that are already making a lot of waves as well. Um, but also the Philosopher's Stone. It's just such a cool card. But then to go back to Menges with a pack with the devil, like that's become like an iconic card. Um, yeah, and even his Violent is so different than the Frazetta one in the
Right.
original, because it has almost kind of like a sickliness to it. Like you can
Hmm.
see it has a very different kind of feel to it, and kind of the emaciated skeleton like body and the rib cage
Right.
being so high up that but also then just like I said, Ian Miller, the Geistwood, River of Flame, Ultimate Horror, Warp Spasm, like all the like
Right.
his the facial work and the kind of
Hmm.
the warping. It's pretty amazing. But you see
Nice.
with Menges, like you said with the Watchtower, I actually have one of his artist series playmats. Um,
I was too late to the game on that one. That was one that I really wanted, but I messaged him and he's like, "Yeah, we're all out." I was like, okay. Well, I tried."
Yeah, they went fast. It's so good that like he there's like so much I think, whereas Ian Miller is with this level of detail. I think with Menges there's like almost like a feeling, and that's where um there's
Hmm.
like even the one Wayfaring Pilgrim reminds me so much of, in some ways, kind of the old Magic the Gathering Swords of the Plowshare. Like he's great at taking these figures and then kind of creating an environment around them. Like in the Pact, there's this like thick, dense forest.
Hmm.
With the Watchtower, you said there's just this kind of vast expanse of mountain range, and that's where even the Tragedy Worrywart, there's like this kind of claustrophobic, like
Right. Yeah.
agoraphobic or paranoid kind of character. And that's what he does so well, is he just kind of can place these figures or these objects in this environment, in this background, that just like you feel kind of that environment in some way.
Right. I like the sites he's done is very like it seems very simplistic, but like in like a really good way where it's like a lot of shapes, a lot of like movement in it, but it kind of I don't know. It seems like his sites have been very like you're kind of looking out at the expanse of this thing or looking from this perspective and just enjoying the view. Where
Mhm.
some of the other ones are just the sites are like chaotic or just like crazy stuff's happening in them, and you're like, oh, this is like there seems to be like a calmness that when I look at the sites in that Jeff Menges does, where like other is the kind of increase my anxiety level or whatever because there's just so much, right? So it's one of those things where I think actually with the Vile Imps, I was lucky enough to interview a guy that decided to go down with uh, yeah, go down to the Sorcery Social Club because I couldn't go, and he was generous enough to say, "Hey, ship me some cards, and I'll get some signed for you." And I was able to get 4 Violent signed by Jeff Menges, which will promptly be going into my deck.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's so. We'll do. We'll kind of skip a couple. I gotta. Unfortunately, I have to go play sorcery at my local game store soon, which I guess is a decent excuse for this.
A good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But this kind of is usually the final question I ask a lot of people is what's your favorite magic, minion, artifact, site, and avatar? So one of each.
Mm. So magic minion artifact site avatar.
Hmm.
Well, I think I gotta go with Battlemage because he's the one that got me there. I think it's such a cool card. If you look at the card itself, there's this whole kind of almost um, like floating kind of city that's all
Yeah.
split apart in the
Hmm.
back, and he has like his single hand up, like
Hmm.
he's ready to kind of go on some sort of offensive.
Hmm.
So it's such a cool aesthetic in the background for him is amazing. As far as minions go, I love the Pudge Butcher. I just think I believe that's Brian Smith, and I
Yep.
think some of
Hmm.
his he just has like an edginess, and there's kind of there's like a goriness to
Right.
some of his work, like Magnetic Muzzle. There's this very intense kind of darkness there that really it almost is jarring given some
Yeah.
of the contrasts where like some of the other cards it's a bit more mellow, but then you go to his work and you can feel this like heaviness to it, which is so
Right.
cool. um, Artifact, I gotta go with Peastone, man. It's just it's such a powerful card, giving you such versatility. I mean, turn one playing Peastone and Battle Mage on turn one, it's just you're just exploding from there. There's like it almost feels unfair with how
Yeah.
good it is.
Yeah, I've definitely with my brother. He plays like basically only Battle Mage, so I have a significant amount of reps into Battle Mage, more than I probably should. And he when he plays Philosopher's Stone turn one, I'm just like, well, it's gonna be that kind of game.
Yeah,
It's gonna be an uphill battle the whole game.
yeah, yeah. As far as sites go, I think the Geistwood is just so cool looking, but I also really love Pillar of Xeros, like all the
Oh,
bodies kind of smashed together. I ended
so
up
good.
getting the Alpha Investments playmat, which was this huge Pillar of Xeros, which was so cool. Um,
Yeah,
and then
that's my favorite site is Pillar of Xeros.
it's so cool.
If I can get, so I have the alpha version. I finally picked that up, which
Nice.
was uh, amazing. I like the colors in it a lot more than I do the beta one, and I was able to pick up a playmat of the Pillar of Zeros. When I saw that, I was like, I probably won't be able to find it like by the bundle, but I was like, I'm going to find a way to get this playmat. I got an opportunity to get it, which was very cool. And laying that out for the first time, I was like looking at all the small details that you can see on just a playmat because it's so big. And the the goal is someday to find a way to. I think it's Dan Seagrave who did it, and
Mhm.
I'm hoping somehow, some way that he's at some con, or I can message him privately and get him to assign my alpha Pillar Zeros would be really cool.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, and then I think it was Magic that you had left.
As far as magics go, there's so many cool ones. Like Poison Nova, super cool.
Hmm.
Infiltrate is cool. I think though, from a kind of a simplistic perspective, Grapple Shot is just it's so powerful and it's such a surprise. And it's
Yeah.
like, I think even the Alan Pollock artwork of like the monster kind of being this like distorted thing with these big teeth and this little guy just like zipping up
Right.
to attack. It's I think Grapple Shot's probably well, actually I think Major Explosion is probably my favorite because it's just it's a card that like you can't it's hard to get away from, and when
Hmm.
it's a one-sided major damage spell, so it costs a lot, but I think Major Explosion is actually my favorite because it's just so powerful.
Okay. Actually, I'll throw one more question here real quick, just because you were there and you did get to, I think, experience this. Is the with the four new Arthurian Legends cards that we
Mm-hmm.
got to see? which one, either from an art perspective or just from potentially building a deck around, or or hey, this might make this thing viable now. What's kind of which one was your favorite that you saw there?
Mm. I think from just a pure gameplay perspective, the siege giant is extremely powerful. I was joking with my buddies about throwing kobolds around because
I think that's a good idea.
it's really, really powerful. Rather than because what it does then is the kobolds don't have to strike you or one of your units. Suddenly, you've just thrown them next to their avatar, and now they're getting hit. And what's great is that the giant giving again surprise movement, giving that surprise movement to then, if they can move diagonally, then get to your opponent's back line. I mean, you it's just it's so powerful. So yeah, I think the siege giant it almost has like an avatar of air ability in a way, being able
Right.
to kind of fly something nearby. Um, but it's a very powerful card, I think.
Yeah, I was. I'll be honest. I was a little jarred when I found out that it was a fire because of all the
Mhm.
green and browns and stuff in the artwork. I was like, this is gonna be totally an Earth card. Like it's literally the same thing as Boredom Militia. It's gonna be an Earth card. And then they were like, it's a fire card. I was like, okay, that's fine. It's just like I was really hoping it'd be Earth because that's my favorite element. And I'll actually, I know I said the last one, but what's your favorite element if you had to choose one?
That's tough. They're all. I, I'd say they're all so good except blue. Because the only reason being is that blue is so defensive. Like
Hmm.
it's very reactive. I'd say I love Earth for the big bodies in good
Hmm.
value, but I think fire. It's just got to be fire because it's one of the better elements for just finishing a game. Some
Hmm.
decks might have a trouble kind of closing a game out,
Right.
but fire is like, oh, you're at death's door. I'll just shoot you with a heat ray next turn, or
Yep.
like I'll just firebolt you. That fire has I have minor explosion people to close
Hmm.
out games. So fire, I think, has that. It's definitely fire for me.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for coming on and talking sorcery with me and talking about your deck. Congratulations again for your top four win. And actually, what did you win for the whole for getting top four?
So for getting top four, I won a signed numbered print of the Quarter Cynthias. So there were
Nice.
15 prints. There was one original artwork, so top 16 would get a print, but it would be numbered based on your position, plus one or minus one. So
Okay.
second place got the first print. Third place got the second print. I got the third print. And so it was a limited edition print of the artwork,
Very
um,
cool.
a top eight Courtesan Cup exclusive mat. So only the top eight people. It was the original Courtesan Thias artwork, but with kind of a black, the grid, a two-player
Hmm.
play mat, the black grid, and then grayscale. So the image was kind of in a black and white, gray, above and below,
Okay.
and then a booster box. Um,
Ooh,
what else? A mortality playmat,
nice.
a bone rabble, um, a game genic deck box. So there
Okay.
was like a deck box, and then one of the guys there, his name's Dave. He owns Flights to Games in Albany, New York. I guess he or one of the guys up there made custom sorcery dice. So it has all the different like disabled, flooded, burned, like all the different kind of status um,
Cool.
on them. So it was a lot actually.
Nice. That's cool. Oh, you deserve it. You got the top four placing. Come on, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a. I think this is considered the biggest tournament. So the purpose of this kind of video series I do is to kind of get guys on and kind of be able to, you get your limelight,
Mhm.
doing winning the tournament, but kind of I think there's a lot of people that want to know why you built the way you did with with cards, and be able to kind of help other people maybe potentially achieve what you have by being able to learn from the masters of the game so far, right? Where like you're gonna go down as like the person that got top four, one of the top four spots in the original Cordes and Theos Cup, right? Like if they do it again, they're it's like, oh, the top four are coming back to try to win it all again, kind of thing. It could be like a whole story. So and thank you again for coming on, and I hope you enjoyed your time on the Sorcerer's Quest. And are you going to Vegas?
I am going to Vegas. Are you going to Vegas?
I am going to Vegas, so we'll have to say hi to each other at the least.
Definitely. Well, I will see you in Vegas for sure. Hopefully, we stay in touch, Spencer, and
Yeah,
and we'll have to figure something out about that Geistwood play, Matt. Maybe.
absolutely. Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
Take
Well,
care.
thanks so much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.